So it's been 2 years since the pandemic began, and by now pastors and churches had hoped that the year 2022 would be the year that things got more back to normal in terms of our church attendance and giving. If that's not true for your church, you're not alone. And in this episode of More Than a Pastor, we're going to talk about 5 financial challenges that will impact church finances and giving in 2022. Hey, what's up? Rich Avery here from morethanapastor.com. Thanks for joining me today for this episode, where we're going to talk about 5 financial realities that are impacting church finances and giving here in 2022. Yeah, it's been a couple of years since the pandemic began, and by now, we had hoped and assumed that things would be more back to normal, that more people would be engaging in church again, our people would be back, and that our church giving levels would be up to what they were before the pandemic. But for so many churches, I'm not sure about your experience, but for so many churches, they're seeing still big decreases in attendance and big decreases in giving. But what does the future hold now for this year and beyond? Are we to accept the reality we have right now? Or do we keep hoping and dreaming and praying for a better future? Well, I think we need to be realistic. I think it's the duty of every leader to define reality, to look at where we're at today, to look at the things happening around us, and to assess what we need to do to make changes or how to pivot or adapt as a result. And so if you're still hoping, dreaming, wishing, praying that things are going to get back to normal, you may need to have a reality check. This may be an opportunity for you to define reality for your church and to make some adjustments and changes now that can help you to become stronger for your church in the future. Maybe the comeback we have been hoping for and praying for is not going to happen, but still we can adapt and we can thrive. So here today, and I want to talk about that in a future episode, some ways that we can adapt and thrive. But today, first, I want to talk about these 5 financial realities that I think every church is going to face. It'll impact church finances and giving in 2022. These are generalities. These may not happen to every church in the same way, but I think these are the trends we need to be mindful of for church finances in 2022. Okay, the first point, number 1, is that engagement across the board is decreasing 30 to 50%. Maybe it's a little bit different for your church. Some churches will certainly see an increase and have been seeing that. But across the board in general, churches are seeing a decrease of 30 to 50%. And it's not just because of the pandemic, although the pandemic certainly did shift attendance patterns. It caused some people to get out of the habit. But also there have been, if you just look at what's been happening in our culture over the last few years, especially with the millennial and Gen Z generations, there's just been a declining of people engaging in church anyway, especially in those younger generations. I talk about that on my podcast. I talk about that in other episodes of this YouTube show here on my channel. So I won't dive into that so much right now, but just know that across the board, engagement is down 30 to 50%, and that's a reality that churches need to accept and begin to adapt to and work toward, and we'll talk about that in future episodes. Point number 2 is that you can expect more income from less people. This has been a really interesting situation that so many churches have found themselves in. As their attendance has decreased, their giving as a percentage was still pretty stable. In some churches, at least for the first 6 months of the pandemic, for the first year, many churches still saw pretty strong giving, even though their engagement in attendance had decreased. Why was that? Because the people who gave more. Even though there were fewer people giving, those who gave more. So a trend, I think, for this year and beyond is that churches are going to see a declining number of giving units. But those who give are going to be giving more to the church. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be sustainable long term, but at least for now, it seems like your more mature givers, those who are more invested in your church, are giving more to help make church happen, to help the church to be sustainable. I'm not sure how long that'll happen, but that I think is a trend for this year. Fewer giving units, but those who are giving more. Point number 3 is that the generational funding gap will widen. And what do I mean by that? Well, I kind of alluded to that a minute ago. It's been well documented that those in the millennial and Gen Z generations are less trusting of institutions like the church. And you and I might not want to think of the church as an institution, but in their minds, we can't go into all the reasons why. I've covered that on my podcast and on this show. There are so many reasons why millennials and Gen Z are allergic to church, are less trusting of institutions like the church because of how the leadership has been run over the years, because of politics. There are so many things, because of LGBTQ, so I won't go into all those. But as fewer millennials and Gen Z are in our churches, that just has to create a generational funding gap. Where is the next generation? How will the church continue to grow and survive as the boomers go on to glory, as Gen Xers, my generation, as we get older, and as we pass? Where is the younger generation to help churches, not only in our funding sustainability, but in our leadership in our churches? So that funding gap, I think, is going to widen. And so churches are going to be faced with a big financial struggle. If your church hasn't yet, you will, as you'll find fewer people of those generations engaging. I think there's some great things we can do to help engage younger generations. I'll talk about that here in a future episode. But just across the board, in general, we're seeing fewer people of the millennial and Gen Z generations engaging in church. It has to make an impact in our finances. Number 4, inflation costs are averaging around $6,000 for every household in America so far this year. I'm recording this in May of 2022. Right now, economists say on average, economists from Bloomberg say that the average household is going to face an increase of $6,000 a year because of inflation. That means their food costs are increasing, fuel costs are increasing, utilities, housing costs, all across the board. Everything we spend money on is getting more expensive. And so that means that the money that we have is worth less than it was before. So Bloomberg estimates about $6,000 per year. So that means every family in America essentially is facing a $6,000 pay cut because of this, or $6,000 in rising costs because of this. And so it impacts every family. But more than that, it impacts your church, because your church is also spending on utilities, on fuel, on food. You've got expenses for your staff. And so think about all the ways your church spends money. This inflation is going to be impacting your church and your budget as well. And you'll have to make some adjustments on that if you haven't already. But think about how it impacts your salary as a pastor, and for all the staff for your church. Now, all of a sudden, your salary is worth $6,000 less. Your other staff members, their salaries are worth $6,000 less than before. That's a $500 a month decrease in your buying power. And so this would be a great time for churches to offer cost of living increases to all of the staff to help make that adjustment, so that your giving, or so that your income is worth the same that it was before. But of course, many churches will not be able to do that. So pastor, I say to you, what can you do now to begin to bridge that gap? You have a $500 a month gap in your buying power, in your income right now. And it may widen, it may grow as inflation gets worse, and if we end up coming into a recession. So what will you do to be able to provide more for your family, to fill that gap? I think that now is a great time to dive into some side hustles, or explore some possible business opportunities for you that you can do on the side, that you can scale up if needed. I've got a free resource to help you with that. Maybe you're not sure. I don't know if starting a business is right for me. Get my free guide. It's called How to Know If Starting a Business is Right for You. In it, I share the top 12 traits that make for a successful business person. I share the top 3 things I think every pastor needs to have if you want to launch and grow a profitable, successful business. You can get that at morethanapastor.com/biz. My 5th point, number 5, is that fears of recession will impact financial decisions for families and churches. As of now, economists are mixed. They're not quite sure. Will we see a full-blown recession in America or a global recession or not? They're not quite sure. But the people in America have fears that it's going to be happening. Recent surveys from CNBC and from Allianz Life Insurance Company show that about 81% of Americans are fearful or worried about recession happening this year. And so what does that mean? If 80% of Americans are fearful or worried about recession, that means that's going to impact their financial decisions. It's going to impact their decisions to buy, their decisions to go on vacation and spend money, their decisions to give to your church. And I know, Pastor, people shouldn't put, people should put giving first. They should give out of the abundance of their heart. They should give out of the gross income that God has given them, and they should give 10% or more. I know that we can talk about that, but not everyone's a mature giver in your church. Not everyone is feeling that freedom to be able to do that. And for some, they're going to be under some serious financial strain or worry or stress, and they're going to be deferring some of those decisions. And so it's going to impact. It's going to impact your church. So those are 5 things that I think are going to impact, 5 financial realities that will impact church finances and giving in 2022. In my next video, I want to share 8 things that every pastor in church can do to adapt and to thrive regardless of these financial situations. I hope you'll take a look at that video. And if you like this video, would you please like it? And if you know of another pastor that should be watching it, please go ahead and share it. Or if you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, go ahead and do so now. It just helps us to be able to spread the word and help as many people as possible. My mission, I'm on a mission to help 1,000 pastors to create sustainable income outside their church. And I want you to be one of them so you can serve God and provide for your family no matter what. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.